Who is your real life hero? What did they do for you? A random dude I met at a mall. I was 15 years old and had just started my first part-time job. During my lunch break I was sitting on a bench texting my friend when this old man suddenly put his hand on my thigh and started stroking me. I yelled stop touching me and immediately got up. I felt scared, alone and incredibly vulnerable. Only one person reacted. He came over and asked me if everything was okay. I was shaking and just said that I had to get back to work. He then offered to follow me so that I wouldn't have to walk by myself. He made me feel somewhat safe in a very scary situation. So yeah, that dude is my hero. Wow, that guy is a great person. My stepdad. When I was a child, I had an asthma attack and went to hospital. I was kept in overnight, but I was too scared to sleep. He climbed into the bed with me and held me until I fell asleep. He always made me feel safe. He came into my life when I was a 1-year-old and couldn't have loved me, my brother, or my mother more. He was the kind of man who would do anything for anyone, and came to my rescue more times than I can count. He's who I want to be when I'm older. He died from cancer 2 days ago. The world without him seems impossible, but because of him, I'm not scared. No, I'm not scared of anything anymore. See you in the next one. Pop. Love you. Thanks everyone for the comments. Love to all. Seems to be a lot of love for stepdads and dads alike. Heartwarming to see. Folks, tell them you love them. Guys. He loved Fleetwood Mac, especially the live album The Dance. When we were kids we'd go on holidays to Europe. My oldest memory is listening to it from the UK to Italy. The whole drive down. I still love it. Thank you for the gold, kind stranger. Another one. Thanks so much. Thanks for the silver, too. Dang dude, sorry for your family's loss. If there is a next life I am sure he's smiling like heck knowing you wrote that about him. Sounds like an amazing man. There are a nearly endless number of stories that I could tell about my father. Throughout my entire childhood, the man was everything from an amateur magician to an insightful educator. When I wanted to create a real lightsaber, he helped me design and build the thing, which really just turned out to be a particularly unsafe flashlight, from scratch. If ever I was curious about some detail in the world, he'd devise an experiment that we could run together, with some of those experiments seeming to involve real magic. Still, perhaps the most important thing that my father ever did for me was teach me how to think. Whenever I needed help with something, regardless of what form the issue took, he would run through the same script with me. What's the problem, he'd ask. Why is it a problem? What's causing the problem? How can you fix it? If my answer to any of those questions was I don't know, he'd encourage me to re-examine the situation. For example, I got a stereo for my birthday when I was about 10 years old, and the CD player stopped functioning after only a couple of weeks. Rather than simply fixing it for me, my father supervised my attempts at diagnosing and repairing the malfunction, using those aforementioned questions as a guide. I can remember carefully extracting screw after screw, exposing the inner electronics of the music player, and thoroughly failing to find anything noticeably wrong with the system. Strangely enough, though, the damned thing started working again after I'd put everything back together, leading my father to offer another life lesson. Sometimes, he told me, if you look at a problem closely enough, it will solve itself. Other times, you have to take a step back and look at the situation as a whole. It took me quite a few years before I realized what I actually learned in those moments, since each scenario seemed pretty unique to me at the time. As I've gotten older, though, I've come to understand what I was actually being taught, and why it was such a valuable skill. There's very little that you can't accomplish if you're willing to figure it out on your own. But sometimes, the real challenge isn't changing the way that you're looking at things. I also learned to make sure that my stereo speakers were actually connected. TLDR. My father helped me approach the world with equal parts wisdom and whimsy. He sounds like a lovely man and a wonderful father. She'll never see this, but my hero is my adult best friend. She's a wife, mother of 2, full-time employee and part-time student. She is the moneymaker and planner of her family and extended family. I'm just blown away by her ambitious attitude and ability to keep everything on track with a positive attitude. She didn't come from a well-off family but has provided tenfold for her kids and even for her brothers. She's taken in people in bad situations and housed them till they get on their feet, or pushed them to do so. Though this isn't why she's my hero. She's my hero because despite all of that she continues to make time for me daily. None of my problems are too small and there's nothing she hasn't been there for. Even though we live 4 hours away, she makes time and drive to be with me. We take turns visiting each other, no less than 2 months apart. I met her and her family because of a relationship I'm no longer in. Since the day we met we've clicked and every day I look up to her. She keeps me going in my darkest times and have held me when I had no one else. We've traveled the country and she's let me into her kids' lives. I called her one night crying my eyes out. My long-term boyfriend had dumped me. Without no hesitation she told me her husband and herself would be there to help me move everything out and she would drive me 4 hours back to my parents. I never ask for her to do anything. She just does it. Not only did they come down, they pretty much packed everything for me and her husband drove my car while I rode with her. Then 4 weeks later made time to meet me again to grab the rest of my stuff. Every day she's my hero for being a light in this dark life. Even if today we stopped speaking and never spoke again, she'd be forever a hero to me. Thanks for reading. TLDR. My hero is my badass friend who's always been there. You should write her a little card or send her a text telling her how much you appreciate her. My dad. My biological father took off when I was young. When my mother met and married my dad, he treated me great, never tried to push himself on me. In 3rd grade, I asked him to adopt me. Since we didn't have a lot of money, he worked 2-3 jobs at a time so they could afford it. He reminds me always that he loves me and has almost punched a few lousy relatives who called me his stepson. He corrects them very quickly that I am in fact his son. I'm very proud of him and hope to become the type of man he is. My grandfather. He taught me strength, kindness and humility. I wouldn't be half the person I am today without him. He passed away 2 weeks ago and something just feels missing in the universe. I am sorry for your loss. Gold medal butt sex. My father-in-law accepted me into his very conservative, traditional family even though at the time I didn't have a job, had no savings to speak of, and came from a different country to live under his roof with no real plan. It took me several years to get on my feet and he never did or said a single thing to make me feel unwelcome or small, even though he could have easily done so. He celebrated all of my small successes and helped us out financially at key moments. Even though he was not at all wealthy, he did this because he trusted his daughter's choice. Even though in our culture marriages are usually arranged and a woman's opinion counts for less than a man's. And also, I like to think, because I worked really hard to make a good impression on him and let him know how grateful I am. He's a good guy and has taught me a lot. That's real family right there. My dad. He's a funny butthole with a huge heart and a genius mind. He's exactly who I want to be and shows me that it's not all about success, it's about people and love, but he'd never say that and I love that. This troubled kid I went to school with accidentally saved my life once. So one day I'm in technology class. This was back when technology wasn't in the classroom. You had to bring the class to the technology, and the teacher is showing us how to do something. This teacher played favorites and she was always asking me to answer questions or go to the board to do something. One day I have a random boner. It happens a lot in middle school that I was trying to ignore when the teacher calls my name to solve something on the whiteboard. Why does he always get called on? The kid shouted out. The teacher looked caught off guard for a moment. Maybe she didn't realize she played favs, and then said, I didn't mean to. How about you solve this one? He went up to the board and saved me some embarrassment. Looking back on it, I don't know if I would have awkwardly tried to get out of going up there or if I would have gone up and tried to somehow hide my erection. Don't know how I would have done that either. It was one of them hard all the way to the tip ones you get in your youth. We're in our 30s now. The guy joined the Marines after high school and moved away. We're still friends on Facebook, and one day a couple years ago he posted something about being depressed, so I told him the story of how he saved me. I hope it cheered him up a little. That's really nice of you to have told him. Sometimes we don't even realize the impact we have on others. My first grade teacher. My kindergarten teacher did frick all to teach us anything and would mislead my parents about my progress in class. So I went into first grade barely able to read, write, and despite being well behaved at home, I was kind of a shithead at school. My shithead attitude went away real quick when I got to first grade. After many stern talks, calls to my parents, and timeouts, I still remember the faded white and green mat she had in the corner 25 plus years later. It stopped being a little butthole. She would work with me every day to improve my reading, and kept pushing me to work harder. But by the end of first grade I was reading at a third grade level. When I was a kid, I would have told you she was my least favorite teacher. I hated having to take my free time to do extra work with her. I just wanted to play with blocks with my friends. Now, I look back on it fondly. I'm not sure who I'd be without her today. The next time I had a teacher like her who was willing to put in the extra time with a student wasn't until 11th grade. I wish there were more teachers like her. I'm a teacher myself. If this lady is still alive, write her a letter or even an email and let her know. Stuff like that can keep us going when everyone else is down on teachers. Most of us keep a drawer or file folder with notes like that. I pull mine out when I feel like I'm not making any difference. Mr. Rogers. My parents were both diagnosed with cancer, brain cancer, breast cancer, within 30 days of each other when I was a kid. We didn't have family in the area to look after my sister and I. My parents were too sick to take care of me, and they both had to take medications for years on and off with devastating depression side effects. So anyway, I would just sit down in front of the TV and watch Mr. Rogers. I love my parents, but the truth is he was the only adult in my life who was always there for me. Always. A young woman who came to my rescue one night. My coked up ex had just thrown me out of my home and I had everything I could manage to grab on me. I had no money because cokehead ex managed to financially cripple me. I was sitting at the train station crying my eyes out and coke ex turned up and started screaming at me. She was working. She had to wait until the sleeper went through the station. She made sure my ex knew she was there. He didn't like to show his real self in front of others, so he went away. She lent me money to stay in a hostel for the night and gave me some food and a couple of cans of coke. She was only about 20 and didn't have to get involved. I hope nothing but good happens in her life. If it wasn't too long ago, she may still work there. I bet you'd make her year if you brought her a little gift or even just went back to thank her again. I had a teacher in high school who was a quadriplegic. He was injured when I was in 9th grade and came back to school when I was in 11th grade. The fortitude it must have taken for him to repair his life after a catastrophic injury and come back to teaching astounds me. He is still an inspiration for me to this day and he will forever have my deepest admiration. My grandma and my 2 aunts who raised me. Mum passed away when I was 7 months old due to some health complications. My grandma raised me as her own child. Well, I was her child. I still to this day get told by my fellow villagers when I meet them that they remember how my grandma used to carry me and I used to suckle on her breast for milk. My grandma then being around age of 56 had no milk on her breast but let me suckle on her cause I would never stop crying. I used to call her mum and would never let anyone touch her and would always be by her. She raised me with my aunt until I was 10 when she passed away in an accident. That day is one of the devastating days of my life. My 2 aunts were the one who brought me to capital of Nepal so I could have a better life than the kids back in my village. Both of them worked in a cashmere wool factory and had built a small house for us with all her savings. They then put me into a private school while my dad was still in village taking care of things there and constantly moving to India at certain intervals for seasonal jobs. They both raised me until I was 12 while both being married and decided to never have children cause I was enough for them as a son. Both of my aunts went to Israel to earn more when I was 15 more and then I had to live with my dad and stepmom until 2 years ago when I came to Australia. They both helped me fund my student fees to come here. My aunts were constantly checking on me via calls. I was the first one to have an iPhone among my friends in my circle and never run out of money during my high school time. They fulfilled my materialistic needs but at the same time gave me motherly love and affection, taught me manners and respect. To this day, despite all those fulfillment and money, I have never acted as a spoilt brat because they taught me humility and my roots. I would never be what I am today without the love of my grandmother and my 2 aunts. This is such a beautiful story. My adoptive older brother has been my superhero. I may not be blood, but he never treated me any different as a younger sister. He has been my emotional rock throughout childhood, teenage years, and even now. He would shield our younger brother and me from parents' wrath, taking blame for us, deal with bullies, and take time to spend time with me to play games and help out with homework. When in middle school and high school, he would be around during my time of need. During my growing pains of puberty, he always had some pads in his backpack, more or less due to how forgetful and a klutz I was. He also introduced me to the hobbies that would help get me through tough times and teach me how to handle myself. My older brother is a wonderful mentor, and despite the fact that we live far apart now, he always has time to be my pen pal. Sure, he teases me a lot for being a bumbling fool at times, the usual big brother thing, but he is a giant with a heart of gold. I could not ask for a better older brother. Your brother is wonderful. My dad. In one summer he had 2 pregnant teens, me one of them. My brother had brain surgery from being hit in the head with a golf club, and he had his first heart attack. Never once did I feel stressed because he just kept it together so well. IDK now looking back on it, how he did it. Doubt he knows either. I didn't have any friends when I started high school. I would eat lunch at a different table each day, that way people wouldn't notice that I was alone. It was very hard and very isolating. I don't want to say I was depressed because I don't think I was, but it was probably the hardest time in my life. Then randomly this gay deaf kid adopted me into his friend group. He said that since he was gay and deaf he knew what it felt like to be an outsider and feel alone. He didn't know my name. He didn't have any reason to talk to me, but he noticed me sitting by myself a couple days in a row and he decided to help. His friends became my friends and the rest is history. I'm eternally grateful for what he did when he dragged me to his table and that he made sure I knew to sit with them the next day and every day after. He probably saved my life. I try to repeat his kindness when I can. Sometimes it's just as simple as smiling at strangers. Sometimes it's going out of my way to check up on a friend that hasn't hung out in a while. And I always try to make everyone know that they are welcomed and accepted around me. Thank you, Dylan. I'm never going to forget what you did for me. Dylan sounds like the kind of person to keep being friends with after school and into adult life. SSG Myra, OEF 2010. I was a young, dumb private who had finished medic school a couple of months before deployment. I had just finished treating some casualties from our mortar team and had to get back to my gun truck, where my platoon was also taking casualties. It was a 200-meter sprint in between good cover. I stepped out without checking to see if we were taking fire. Myra grabbed the back of my plate carrier and jerked me back as a spray of enemy rounds landed in front of me. You're good, Doc. This time, we'll lay down some cover fire. Myra really saved my bacon that day. I thanked him every time I saw him. You did good too, mate. Don't forget it. Also, I'm assuming he now uses you as an example of what not to do. Or so I hope. My mom. She looks after my 92-year-old grandmother who has severe Alzheimer's by herself. That, plus a hectic job. She only just recently retired, managing a household, as well as looking after an elderly neighbor who lives alone. Mom checks in on her every day and brings her over for meals if she's feeling lonely, or takes her to church. Plus she volunteers every now and then with an animal charity, transporting dogs to their vet appointments. Despite all of these stresses, she's still very optimistic and selfless, saying that if she can help anyone, she is willing to. My grandma was the baddest bee I ever knew. She gave birth at home 18 times on her own with just one other woman there to catch the baby. My grandpa tried his whole life to convert her to his religion, but she died without budging. She suffered abuse, losses and many medical problems until she was brave enough to say she was tired and ready to go. The last week she was alive, she told my mom that she saw death coming for her in her dreams, but she wasn't afraid. She inspires me every day to be a strong mother for my kids and a strong person for myself. How the heck did she survive 18 births with no hospital? That insane. kindergarten gym teacher. My dad passed away when I was a baby. It was Father's Day and our teacher made everyone make cards for their father. I didn't have one, so I made one for my gym teacher. For some reason I looked up to him. Anyway, my teacher called him up to my class so I can give it to him. He came up with a packet of Lay's chips and a bucket of sidewalk chalk as a gift for me. He was notoriously known for always eating Lay's chips. He probably doesn't remember it, but years later I still do, and it meant the world to me. I'm not sure if he's still alive since he was really old, but I think about him a lot. When I was a kid I really liked Dave Baksh cause he was a brown Canadian guy like me, but he was freaking cool unlike most brown guys in shows and stuff cause they always get portrayed as losers, right? And I am a bit of a loser, but I still wanted to be cool like Dave, and I love Sum 41. Long live Brown Sound. My foster dad. He took me in when he didn't have to, and he showed me kindness that I'd never seen before. The first thing he did was buy me a new baseball glove and play catch with me. The one I had was used and in poor shape. He did so much for, and I'll forever be grateful. I'm 18, so it'll be a long time before I can actually make this happen. But I badly want to be a foster parent. I want to be the person to take in older kids and siblings. I hear so many wonderful stories about how foster parents have changed and saved lives. I know that parenting isn't easy, but if I can have that kind of positive impact on someone's life, I want to do it. An original but my father. He was a stay-at-home dad during a time when it wasn't really socially acceptable. He is my best friend and one of the funniest, most light-hearted people I know. But when I needed a father he was there for me. It didn't matter if the moms and dads at the bus stop would joke about him or laugh at him when I was little. He would walk me and my brothers there every day and wait for us at the stop we got back from school. Something I didn't realize was happening until I was older. He taught me how to respect others and myself. He taught me how to stand up for what I believe in, and anytime I needed someone to fight for me he was there. I was lazy in high school and he pushed me when I needed it. When I wanted to change colleges to be with my girlfriend he was the only one who supported me. 5 years later he was the one who ran the ceremony at my wedding for that same girlfriend. End of this month he's flying in to drive one of our cars across country when my wife and I move to start a new job. He's who I strive to be and I love him more than I could ever express. Your father sounds wonderful. My aunt and uncle. My dad died when I was 19 in a pretty brutal motorcycle accident. I was living in a different state, but he was near his sister and husband. When we came to the memorial, my house in another state was robbed. Small town. Knew we would be gone. Massive grow house for marijuana. And my aunt, sensing I was lost or depressed or for whatever reason, decided to offer me free rent in their basement if I enrolled in college. I took her up on that with very little hesitation. Free rent, college, things I never even dreamed of. I went to culinary school. I had only ever known working in kitchens since I was 14. Seemed like a solid choice. Graduated after 3 years. Bachelor's degree in applied science. Chef apprenticeship certificate. Blah blah blah. Fast forward 12 years later. The catering manager for a company that does about 2M in sales in catering alone. Maybe 200M for the remaining restaurants locally across 2 states. Engaged to the love of my life. Buying a house. Literally closing this week. Picking up the keys on the 23rd of May. I have constant appreciation and realization of how different my life would have been had she not offered it to me and they had not lived up to housing me for 3 years. We stay in constant contact, regularly eating dinner together and having Jeopardy binge sessions screaming at each other. I said IT first. Incredible lady. Incredible man. Loves of my life. My mom. I know it sounds cheesy, but I mean it. She put up with years of emotional, psychological and sexual abusers to not shatter the relationship I and my sister had with my father. I hated her when I was about 10-13 because I was always a daddy's girl, and she took it. She just swallowed her tears and accepted the names I called her when she was being mean to him. Come to find out years later, she was being mean cause he was doped up and it pee her off. She never even told me about this stuff. 2. She was gonna take it to her grave, but I had a wild hair one day to ask her and man, did I cry and beg for forgiveness. She said I was just a kid. didn't know any better, and she preferred that it happened that way and that I didn't know how truly viscous my father was until I was old enough to handle it. She wanted us to grow up with both parents, but when she decided she had had enough, she moved us in with my grandma, worked a full-time job and put herself through medical school to become an RN, all while being in Navy Reserves. She is a BAMF. She's a retired chief from the Navy, served a little over a year in Afghanistan, and once broke a dude's nose for calling her a CNT. I love her so much. My mother and father-in-law, they are more parents to me than my biological parents ever will. After I was essentially kicked out of my family at 13, they took me in and I ended up marrying one of their daughters, who was and still is my best friend. I've had a lot of great teachers, and one in particular, my high school art teacher, bought me a small Wacom tablet with his own money after seeing my passion for digital art. He delivered it to my house one night and asked my parents and I not to let any other students know that he'd played favorites. Now as 30, I'm making a great living as a digital artist. Myself. I used to be a homeless, college, unemployed high school graduate. Now I'm a homeowner, albeit with a mortgage, own my vehicle outright, work full-time in my field, and I have an Rs, a BS, and an Ms. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.